Ever wonder how far someone can be pushed before they push back? I was just a small-town girl from Mississippi, barely able to scribble my own name, working as a cook in a boarding house. But for years, 5 men, including my boss, treated me like their personal plaything in twisted workplace games, until I decided enough was enough and served them justice, one slow, bitter sip at a time. They never saw it coming. Me, the quiet cook, staring them down as I stirred their fate into their morning coffee. One by one, they dropped like flies, and no one ever pointed a finger at me. 60 years later, I don't regret a single moment of it. My name's Geraldine May Quinn, but folks around Westbrook call me Granny D. I'm 87 now, barely 5 feet tall, with hands rough as sandpaper from a lifetime of hard work. My hair's gone from coal black to snow white, always tied up in a bun to beat Mississippi's heat. People say my brown eyes cut right through you, like I can see your secrets. Maybe I learned that from years of watching, always bracing for what was coming next. I'm curious about you, though. Where are you reading this from? Some big city like Chicago, or maybe a quiet corner of the South like me? Drop your name in the comments, I'd love to know. I picture my story reaching places this old lady never got to see. Maybe even someone who's tasted my famous jambalaya at my Westbrook restaurant, my pulled pork and cornbread. Folks say it's finger-licking good. These days I live in a cosy house on the edge of Westbrook. It's no mansion, but compared to the closet-sized maid's room I once called home, it's a castle. My pride and joy is my garden, where I grow every herb and spice I use. Basil, thyme, rosemary, mint, you name it. There's even a tiny patch of Jimson weed tucked in a corner, my little secret from back when I needed it most. My kitchen's the heart of my home. I've got a custom wood-burning stove, just like the one I grew up with, where I slow-cook recipes that soak up every bit of flavour. The smell of wood smoke and fresh herbs? Nothing beats it. Sure, I've got a modern stove and fridge, but give me that old stove and my trusty wooden mortar and pestle any day. That mortar's been with me since I was 15, worn smooth from grinding spices. And, well, other things that changed my life. It's got a hidden compartment too, empty now, but once the keeper of my biggest secret. My restaurant, Earth's Bounty, started as a hole in the wall with a rickety stove and a few tables. Now it's got 6 locations across Mississippi, drawing folks from all over for my chicken and dumplings or gumbo that's got no rival. I've fed senators, TV stars, even a country singer or two. The secret? Patience, love, and a few herbs only I know how to blend just right. But I'm still Granny D, up at dawn, picking herbs, testing recipes. I don't run the kitchen full-time anymore, my legs won't let me, but I still whip up special dishes for out-of-town guests. What means the most, though, is who I hire. Women who've been through the ringer, just like I was. I call them my heart daughters. Over 200 of them have worked for me, coming in broken and leaving with their heads high. Some manage my restaurants now. Others have started their own businesses or gone off to culinary school. Seeing them shine feels better than any fame I've got. People call me a hero sometimes, but I'm no saint. I just know what it's like to stand at the edge of despair with no one to pull you back. And I know sometimes a mortar and pestle plus a little know-how about plants can be the only way out. When folks ask how I went from nothing to this, I give them the usual: hard work, grit, never giving up. That's what they want to hear. But the real story? I've kept it locked away for over 60 years, scared of judgment or disbelief. Today I'm ready to spill it all. This isn't a fairy tale. It's raw, ugly, and real, from a time when poor girls like me were worth less than dirt, and justice was only for the powerful. Back in 1952, I was 14, living in Brookhaven, up in northern Mississippi. My dad had passed from some strange fever 2 years before, leaving Mum to raise 8 kids alone. We were packed into a tiny shack with a dirt floor, hunger gnawing at us daily. We stuck together, though, and I felt safe, or so I thought. Then, one day, a man named Arthur Mendez rolled up in a shiny car, all dressed up, saying he owned a boarding house in Westbrook and needed a young cook. He promised a wage and even a chance to go to school. For a starving family, it sounded like a lifeline. Mum, with tears in her eyes, let me go, one less mouth to feed, and a shot at a better life for me. I packed my few things, tucked my grandma's mortar and pestle in my bag, and hopped in the back of a truck to a town I'd never heard of, working for a man I barely knew. I had no clue about the nightmare waiting for me. I couldn't have guessed that choice would turn me, a scrawny, illiterate girl, into the judge and jury of 5 men who thought they were untouchable, or that their downfall would come in a steaming cup, served with a smile. I'm telling you everything, no sugarcoating. How they broke me, what they forced me to endure, and how I found my own way to serve justice, one nobody else would give me. A justice brewed with the bitter taste of revenge. Let's go back to the start, though, or none of this will make sense. I was born in Brookhaven, on a speck of land my dad, Michael, scraped together after years of back-breaking work. The soil was rocky, barely giving us enough to eat, but it was ours. Dad was up before dawn and back after dark. A quiet man with steady hands and a warm heart. Mum, Irene, kept us fed and clothed, taking in laundry from richer folks in town. She'd haul heavy loads to the river, coming back with raw hands and a bent back, but never a complaint. "As long as I've got my health, we've got enough," she'd say. Enough, though, was something we never really had. There were 8 of us kids, all close in age. I was the 3rd girl, stuck in the middle. Above me were James and Tommy, helping Dad in the field since they were little. Below me came Luke, Sarah, Joey, Peter, and little Maggie, the baby born just before Dad passed. Life was tough, but we had each other, until Arthur Mendez showed up and changed everything. Life back in Brookhaven was tough, but it had its sweet moments, like rare sips of cold water on a scorching day. By the time my little sister Maggie came along, Mum was so worn out she couldn't even nurse her. We'd feed Maggie goat's milk from a makeshift wooden bottle when we could scrape it together. We didn't have much, but the simple stuff stuck with me, like the smell of wet earth after a Mississippi rain, a scent so rich it felt like the world was promising better days. When those rare storms hit, us kids would run outside, laughing, letting the rain soak us through as the dust turned to mud under our bare feet. Food was scarce, but the taste of Mum's slow-cooked beans, flavoured with a dab of pork fat and a sprig of rosemary from her tiny garden patch, still lingers in my memory. On lucky days, Dad would bring home a scrap of meat, and if the harvest was good, we'd have cornbread, golden, warm, baked in the wood oven, filling the house with a smell so good we'd crowd around, peeking through the oven door like it was Christmas morning. Morning started with the rooster's crow, sharp as an alarm clock, followed by the cows mooing for their milking and the goats bleating in the pen. The birds, thrushes, cardinals, bluebirds, put on a concert no radio could match. We were dirt poor, but in our own way we were happy. That all shattered in 1950 when I was 12. Dad got sick, a fever that wouldn't quit. A man who'd never spent a day in bed was suddenly too weak to stand, shivering like he'd break apart, sweating one minute and burning up the next. Mum tried everything, herbal teas, clay poultices with herbs on his feet, old remedies from the local midwife. Nothing worked. Desperate, she sold her wedding ring and a tiny silver cross from her grandma to pay for a wagon to get Dad to a doctor in town. I can still see him, carried out, his eyes sunken, skin yellow, barely the man I knew. The doctor threw out guesses, typhoid, malaria, maybe something else, but his expensive pills did nothing. Dad came home, but he never got up again. One frosty June morning, he took his last breath. We couldn't afford a proper funeral. Neighbours patched together a coffin from old boards, and we buried him under a magnolia tree in the community cemetery. Mum held it together, crying quietly, knowing she couldn't break with 8 kids counting on her. But poverty, already a shadow over us, turned into a cruel beast. Without Dad's work in the fields, food got even scarcer. Mum washed laundry from dawn to dusk, but the money never stretched far enough. My older brothers, James and Tommy, tried to keep the farm going, but they were just boys, not ready to fill Dad's shoes. One by one, we had to let go of what little we had. The animals were sold off to buy food. Then my siblings started leaving. First was my sister Sarah, just 11, sent to a merchant family in town to care for their kids. They promised food and clothes, but no pay. Mum cried all night, then packed Sarah's things, whispering, "It's for your own good," like she was convincing herself. Sarah was gone 3 years by the time I left. Then Luke, only 10, went to work on a cattle farm, sleeping in a barn. He'd send shaky notes saying he was okay, but we knew better. 2 more siblings were sent to wealthier families with promises of food, clothes, maybe school. Promises, that's all they were. We rarely heard from them after. Mum was fading, her hands gnarled from scrubbing clothes in the cold river, her face streaked with hidden tears. I knew my turn was coming. In places like Brookhaven, poor girls like me ended up as maids or nannies, working until we married and started the cycle over. Then, one sticky September day, Arthur Mendez showed up. He rode in on a sleek black horse, dressed in crisp clothes and a felt hat, looking like he stepped out of a movie in our dusty little world. He'd asked around at Mr. Anderson's store for families with girls who could cook, and Mr. Anderson pointed him to us. "Mrs. Irene," he said, sitting on our porch, sipping weak coffee Mom offered. "I hear you've got a daughter with a knack for cooking." His voice was smooth as honey, his eyes flicking between Mom and me as I poured, hands shaking. Arthur ran a boarding house in Westbrook, he said, a place for merchants, farmers, even the occasional politician. He needed a young assistant cook, someone clean, respectful, quick to learn. He dangled a monthly wage, a place to sleep, food, clean clothes, even a chance to go to school in my spare time. To us, scraping by on nothing, it sounded like a miracle. Mum wanted to believe one of her kids could have a shot at something better. And me? I was naive enough to think I'd work hard, eat every day, maybe send a few dollars home, even learn to read and write properly, something our patchy rural school never gave me. The decision came fast. I'd leave with Arthur the next morning. That night I packed my burlap sack, 2 patched outfits, my one good church dress, a broken comb, and Grandma's wooden mortar and pestle. Mum stayed up, teaching me her recipes, drilling into me to be honest, work hard, prove I was worth it. The goodbye was heart-wrenching. James and Tommy gave quick hugs before heading to the fields, taught not to show tears. Little Abigail, 8, clung to my skirt. Joey, 6, hid under the bed, refusing to say goodbye. Maggie, just 3, wailed for me to hold her, not understanding I wouldn't be back soon. Mum tried to stay strong, but I saw her trembling lips, her misty eyes as she hugged me. "Be strong, Geraldine," she whispered, slipping a small cloth pouch around my neck with a prayer and a pinch of Brookhaven soil. "So you never forget where you came from." That pouch stayed with me for years, until it was taken, along with everything else I held dear. I climbed into the back of a rickety truck with 2 men hauling supplies, Arthur leading on his horse. As we pulled away, I looked back at Mom standing by our shack, the little ones clinging to her, all waving. It's an image burned into my mind, clear as day even now. The trip took 2 grueling days, bouncing over dirt roads under a blazing sun. At night, we camped by the road, and Arthur had me cook rice, beans and jerky over a fire. I slept curled up in the truck bed, clutching my sack, wrapped in a thin blanket, as far from the men as I could get. The trip to Westbrook left a knot in my gut, like I'd swallowed a stone I couldn't name. We rolled into town late on the second day, and for a country girl like me, it was like stepping onto another planet. The streets buzzed with cars, trucks and people, more than I'd ever seen in one place. I stood there, jaw dropped, clutching my burlap sack, feeling smaller than a speck of dust in this loud, sprawling world. Arthur Mendez strode ahead, and I trailed him like a nervous pup, my eyes darting at the sights. His boarding house, The Good Rest sat just off the main drag, a faded blue mansion with a sagging porch and a crooked sign out front. From a distance it looked almost charming, but up close the peeling paint, overgrown yard and creaky floorboards told a different story. Inside, the main room doubled as a reception and dining area, with worn-out chairs, a long table for meals, and a corner stacked with liquor bottles. The air was thick with mould and cigarette smoke, and damp stains crawled up the walls. A hallway led to about 10 tiny rooms, bare bones, with just a bed and a nightstand. Most didn't even have a bathroom. Guests shared 2 grimy ones at the end of the hall. To the right was the kitchen, a big but dim space with a massive wood stove, a rusty gas one, and a wooden table for prep work. Shelves sagged under pots, plates and supplies. That kitchen became my world for years. Behind it was a cramped, stuffy room with 3 thin mattresses on the floor. "This is where you'll sleep," Arthur said, with the other girls. I met them soon enough. Nora, about 20, had been there longest, her eyes dull like she'd seen too much. Claudia, pushing 30, handled laundry with a quiet, weary shuffle. Claire, close to my age, did whatever was needed, her voice barely above a whisper. They all moved with their heads down like they were scared of their own shadows. That first night, lying on my lumpy mattress, hearing the house creak and groan, I felt a shiver of fear. I told myself it was just the newness of it all, but deep down I knew better. Right away, Arthur asked for my papers. All I had was a tattered birth certificate. "Gotta keep it safe," he said, slipping it into a folder. I never saw it again. My days started before dawn, lighting the wood stove, making coffee, porridge and bread for the guests, helping Nora with lunch, scrubbing dishes, prepping dinner, and cleaning until past midnight. It was a grind, but I threw myself into it, hoping to prove my worth, clinging to the dream of school and a paycheck. When I asked about school, Arthur brushed me off. "Focus on learning the job first," he said. "We'll get to that later." At the end of the month, I mustered the courage to ask about my pay. His laugh hit me like a cold wind. "Pay? You think you've earned enough to cover your trip, your food, your bed? That all costs money, girl." I tried to argue. The deal was supposed to include a wage, but his glare shut me up. "Not happy? Leave, but you're a long way from home with no money. Good luck walking back." He turned away, and I felt the trap snap shut. That's when it hit me. I wasn't an employee. I was a prisoner, caught in a web of empty promises. But the worst was still coming. I started noticing the looks, not just from Arthur, but from certain guests. Hungry stares that lingered too long, sizing me up like a prize hog. 5 men stood out, regulars who came like clockwork. There was Arthur, the boarding house owner, Colonel Justin, a wiry old farmer everyone feared, Ambrose, a rough cattle trader with a mean streak when drunk, Owen, the slick bank manager who played the part of a family man, and Dr. Foster, the town doctor, who sometimes looked guilty but never spoke up. They'd gather monthly to drink, play cards, and do things a 14-year-old shouldn't know about, let alone endure. The first time I saw them together, I was serving dinner. Colonel Justin grabbed my wrist, his grip like a vice. "This the new one, Arthur?" he asked, eyeing me like I was livestock. Arthur grinned, a twisted glint in his eye. "Fresh in, but she's almost ready for a test run." I didn't get it then, but I'd learned soon enough what test run meant, and it would break me. Just 2 weeks in, I got my first taste of their cruelty. It was Arthur's birthday, and he wanted cornbread with molasses. Nora was down with a fever, Claudia couldn't bake, so it fell to me. The boarding house's wood stove was a beast, too hot on one side, too cold on the other. My cornbread was a disaster, half burnt to charcoal, half raw dough. I panicked, hoping to hide it, but Arthur stormed in, sniffing the burnt mess. His eyes narrowed. "This is what you make for my birthday, you useless girl!" he roared. Before I could speak, his hand cracked across my face, knocking me to the floor. My cheek burned. Blood filled my mouth from biting my tongue. He grabbed the hot, ruined cornbread and smeared it on my face, the burnt bits scorching my skin. "Taste your failure," he snarled. Blisters rose instantly, and the mark of his hand stayed for weeks. That's when I knew I wasn't just a worker, I was property, like a chair or a mule. When I asked about pay again, his laugh was colder than a winter creek. "You owe me for the trip, your meals, your bed," he said. "It'll be a long time before you see a dime." I protested, but he cut me off. "Walk away if you want. No money, no papers, no one to believe a nobody like you over me, a respected man in this town." The trap was complete. I wasn't just stuck, I was owned, and the worst, the very worst, was still to come. Out in Westbrook, Owen played the part of a gentleman, flashing big smiles, tipping his hat to everyone, even the maids. "Good morning," he'd chirp, like he was the town's golden boy. But behind that polished mask, he was the worst of them, cruel in a way that cut deeper because you never saw it coming. Then there was Dr. Isaac Foster, the town doctor, a widower in his mid-50s living in a fancy house by the square. He'd sometimes let a flicker of guilt cross his face, once even slipping me a painkiller after Ambrose got rough, like a pill could erase what he'd done too. Every full moon, those 5, Arthur, Colonel Justin, Ambrose, Owen and Dr. Foster, gathered at the Good Rest for what they called a friend's dinner. Us girls, we called it the Night of Terror. It started innocent enough, with me and the others serving up a feast, roasted pork, fried chicken, jambalaya packed with the best jerky. Arthur would unlock his special cabinet, pulling out top-shelf whiskey, wine and beer. They'd eat, drink, laugh and swap stories, their voices booming through the house. Then came the card game. High stakes, betting cash, cattle, even land. And other things too. That's when the air turned heavy, like a storm about to break. Before I go deeper, let me ask. Got the guts to keep reading? This next part's not for the faint-hearted. Think you can handle it and still hit that like button? Only the brave will stick with me to the end, so let's see what you're made of. After the cards and too many drinks, Arthur would stand, a sick grin spreading across his face. "Time for dessert," he'd say, clapping 3 times. That was our cue. Me, Nora, Claudia, and any other girl working there would shuffle in, heads bowed, trembling like leaves in a windstorm. They'd eye us like cattle at auction, tossing out crude comments about our bodies, debating who looked fresh that night. Sometimes they'd bet on us at the card table, the winner picking first. Other times they'd bicker over who got who. Me, being the youngest at 14, was always the prize they fought over. "Fresh meat's the tenderest, right?" Colonel Justin would leer, running a bony hand down my cheek, his breath reeking of whiskey and cigars. Ambrose would pinch my arms or thighs, leaving bruises that bloomed purple. "Still green, this one," he'd grunt, like I was a fruit not yet ripe. Owen played nice, offering me candy with a creepy, "Come to Uncle, I'll treat you gentle." Lies. His kindness vanished the second the door shut. Dr. Foster stayed quiet, eyes down, like he was ashamed, but it never stopped him. Arthur, he acted like he owned us. "I brought you here," he'd say. "I can do what I want and share you with my friends." The first time it happened, I fought back. When Arthur announced I was dessert, I screamed, begged, tried to bolt for the kitchen. Ambrose grabbed me, his hands like iron, pinning me like a rag doll. They laughed, thought my struggling was part of the fun. "That's the spirit," Colonel Justin cackled. "It's better when they fight." Arthur claimed first dibs since he'd bought me, and the others agreed, but only if they could watch. They dragged me to his room, tossed me on the bed like a sack of flour. I tried to cover myself to curl up small, but what chance did a 14-year-old have against 5 grown men? What happened that night, and so many nights after, is hard to put into words. Not just because of the shame or the scars, but because they did things I didn't even know could exist. They tore my dress like it was tissue paper, my body shaking so hard the bed creaked. Tears poured down as I begged to go home to Mum. They just laughed. Arthur went first, peeling off his hat and belt, but keeping his sweaty shirt on, only undoing what he needed. The others circled the bed, bottles in hand, like vultures at a sick ritual. They barked suggestions, how to hold my arms, twist me this way or that, cover my mouth so the other guests wouldn't hear. They drank, toasted, and joked like it was a party, not a room where a girl was breaking apart. Arthur's sweat dripped on me, sour and heavy, as he whispered I was his property, bought and paid for. Fresh from Brookhaven, he bragged to the others. I'm teaching her everything. They clapped like he'd won a prize. When he was done, he stood smug, adjusting his clothes. "Who's next?" he asked, like he was slicing up a pie. Colonel Justin stepped up, his eyes cold as ice. He liked pain, yanking my hair until clumps tore out, biting my shoulders, squeezing my neck until I gasped for air. "Cry louder," he'd hiss, feeding off my fear like it was fuel. Ambrose was next, built like a bull, his whiskey breath choking me. He didn't need to hold me down, his weight alone pinned me. "Just a maid, not even human," he'd mutter when I whimpered, blaming me if his drunken clumsiness failed him, his fists landing hard in frustration. Owen was cruel in his own way, all about humiliation. He'd force me into degrading poses, demanding I say I liked it, his polite smile never fading. If I didn't obey, he'd twist or press just right to hurt without leaving marks. I studied anatomy, he'd boast, showing off for the others. Dr. Foster came last, when I was too battered to keep my eyes open. He'd play doctor, muttering technical terms like he was examining a patient. "This might be uncomfortable," he'd say, as if that made it less monstrous. They didn't leave after. They'd linger, drinking, rating each other's performance, planning the next time like it was just another game. I'd lie there, ignored, broken, except when one decided on a second round. The worst part, the power they relished, not just over my body, but knowing no one would save me, that I had nowhere to run. The next morning, they'd act like nothing happened. I'd serve them breakfast, my hands shaking, while they read papers or talked business. Owen went back to his bank, Dr. Foster to his clinic, Colonel Justin to his farm, Ambrose to his cattle deals. Arthur stayed, barking orders, smirking when our eyes met, like he was counting down to the next full moon, and it always came. Sometimes they'd force me to serve 2 or 3 at once, using every part of me, laughing, competing, treating me like a thing without a soul. Nora, who'd been there longest, had a hollow look on those nights, like she'd already died inside. Claudia and Claire weren't much better. We were all trapped, surviving in a hell none of us could escape. Yet. On those full moon nights, Nora moved like a ghost, her eyes empty, as if her soul had slipped out and left her body to endure the horror. Claudia wept silently, tears carving tracks down her face, but never a sound. She knew they only wanted the noises they demanded. By 3 or 4 a.m., when the men finally collapsed, sprawled drunk across the boarding-house rooms, we'd creep to the bathroom one by one. We'd scrub our skin raw, sometimes till it bled, trying to wash away their filth. But that stain, it sank too deep, somewhere water couldn't touch. Come morning, we had to act like nothing happened. I'd cook their breakfast, serve it with a forced smile, clean up their mess while they went back to their respectable lives. Owen, the bank manager, all polished and proper. Dr. Foster, the caring doctor. Colonel Justin, the big-shot farmer. Ambrose, the cattle trader. And Arthur, lording over the good rest like nothing was wrong. It was a sick routine, month after month, with no way out. Sometimes, between full moons, one of them would show up alone, demanding special service. Arthur never said no. His friends, his accomplices, got what they wanted, and he'd take any of us whenever he pleased, day or night. A quick tap of his fingers on the table, and we knew what was coming. Claire, a girl who arrived just before me, broke under the weight of it all. One night, after Ambrose, drunker than usual, did things too awful to name, she waited until the house was quiet. Then she tied a sheet to a ceiling beam and ended it. Arthur found her in the morning. No funeral, no prayers, just a nameless cross in a mass grave at the cemetery. Only us girls trapped in that hell mourned her. Seeing Claire's fate lit a fire in me. I wouldn't go out like that. I wouldn't let them win, wouldn't let them grind me down until I gave up. I'd survive somehow, and maybe one day I'd escape. 6 months in, I saw my chance. It was a Sunday, and Arthur was off at a cattle auction, not due back till night. Nora was sick again, her body crumbling under the abuse. Claudia was buried in laundry. No one was watching me. I grabbed my burlap sack, Grandma's mortar and pestle and a few coins I'd scraped together, and slipped out the kitchen window. I hopped the low wall behind the boarding house and ran, heart pounding like it might burst, adrenaline screaming through me. Freedom, even for a moment, tasted sweeter than anything. I hit the road out of town, not knowing where to go, just knowing it had to be far from there. I walked for hours, my old shoes tearing my feet bloody, the sun beating down like a hammer. But every step felt like defiance, like I was stealing my life back. I'd gone maybe 9 miles when I heard an engine. I dove into a roadside bush, heart in my throat as a car sped by. I thought I was clear, then another vehicle crept closer. Ambrose's pickup. He slowed, like he sensed something, then kept going. I thought I'd made it. I scrambled out, walking faster, desperate to keep moving. Then the engine roared again, closer. Before I could hide, Ambrose's truck screeched to a stop. "Well, look at this, a little mouse sneaking out of the trap," he growled, his whiskey breath sour even in the morning air. He yanked me by the hair, dragging me to the truck as I screamed and kicked. "Shut it or I'll smash your teeth right here," he snarled, tossing me in the back like a slaughtered hog. He bound my hands and feet with cattle rope, and we sped back to Westbrook, back to the boarding house, back to hell. All the way, Ambrose taunted me, saying Arthur would make me wish I was dead. When we got there, Arthur was already back from the auction. Ambrose hauled me inside by my hair, throwing me onto the living room floor in front of guests and the other girls. "Look what I caught trying to run," he sneered, kicking my ribs to force me onto all fours. The punishment was worse than I could have imagined. Arthur summoned Colonel Justin, Owen and Dr. Foster. He wanted a show, a lesson for us all. They tied me to a chair in the middle of the room. Each took their turn. Belts, hands, boots, whatever they could grab. Colonel Justin used his riding crop, slicing my skin like fire. Ambrose swung a wet rope that burned with every lash. Owen's heavy rings cut my face with each slap. Dr. Foster hit the least, but he still joined in. Arthur used his prized belt, the big buckle tearing into me. I blacked out from the pain. When I came to, they dumped me in the boarding house cellar, a damp, dark hole filled with rotting food and rats. For 2 weeks, I was locked there, getting a scrap of food and a cup of water once a day. The darkness, the silence, the skittering rats, it broke something in me. When they finally dragged me out, I could barely stand. My ribs jutted out, my skin was sallow, my hair fell in clumps. But the real damage wasn't on the outside. The girl who'd held on to hope, who believed in people's goodness, died in that cellar. I went back to work, cooking, cleaning, serving, enduring their abuse, but inside I wasn't the same. Fear and despair had hardened into something new, a cold, burning rage, a vow to survive and make them pay. A month after my punishment, I met Miss Evelyn, the woman who'd change everything. She was an old herbalist who came to the boarding house weekly, selling teas for aches, ointments for cuts, tonics for men's vigour, with a sly smile. Arthur let her in because her remedies worked, and the guests loved them. He even used her balm for his bad back. Miss Evelyn was sharp, her small eyes missing nothing. Our bowed heads, our hidden bruises, the fear that spiked when Arthur or his crew got close. One day, while I helped her carry herb jars to the kitchen, she grabbed my arm, gentle but firm, and looked straight into me, like she saw my soul. "I know what's happening here, child," she whispered. "You don't deserve this. None of you do." Her words hit me like a lifeline. For the first time in months, someone saw me as human, not a thing. I wanted to collapse into her arms, beg her to save me, but I'd learned trust could be a trap. "I can't get you out yet," she went on. "They've got friends in high places, police, city hall, but I can teach you things to help." She slipped me a small cloth bag of dried herbs. "For the pain," she said. "Boil it and drink after, you know." I nodded, tucking the bag in my apron, my throat too tight to speak. "I'm here every Thursday," she added. "Need me, find me, and remember, even the frailest herb can bring down a giant if you know how to use it." I thought she meant it as a metaphor, a way to say I could find strength to endure. Later, I'd learned she was offering me something far more dangerous, a path to justice no one else would give me. That night, lying on my thin mattress, Arthur's snores echoing down the hall, I made a choice. I wouldn't die here. I wouldn't end like Claire. I'd survive no matter what it took, and one day I'd make them answer for their sins. I didn't know how yet, but Miss Evelyn's words planted a seed, a spark of vengeance that would grow into something unstoppable. A tiny spark of hope, one I thought had died in that dark cellar, flickered back to life. It wasn't the kind of hope that dreamed of escape. After the beating I took for trying to run, I knew that door was locked tight. This was a darker hope, sharp and dangerous, but it was all I had left. Thursdays became my lifeline when Miss Evelyn rolled up to the Good Rest with her baskets of herbs and tonics. While I helped her carry jars to the kitchen, we'd whisper, quick, careful words that grew into something more. At first, she taught me simple remedies, teas to soothe internal wounds, ointments for the places that hurt most after those brutal nights. Slowly, I started to trust her, and she saw something in me too. One day, when the kitchen was empty, she pulled me into a shadowy corner. "My grandma taught me about herbs, and my mama passed it down," she said, her voice low. "Now I teach women who need it. You need it, Geraldine." What started as ways to ease my pain turned into secret lessons about the power of plants, plants that could do more than heal. Miss Evelyn knew every root, leaf, and flower in Mississippi's woods. She knew what mended a body, and more importantly for me, what could break one. "Nature's got two sides," she'd say. "The same plant that saves a life can take one if you use it right, or wrong." One plant hooked me. Jimson weed, those pretty white and purple flowers you see in every overgrown yard. "Looks harmless," Miss Evelyn said, "but it's got cousins that can kill quiet. Best part, they don't leave a trace." She taught me how to spot it, pick it, dry it, and boil it with alcohol to make a potent extract, letting the fumes fade to hide the smell. I had to do it all in secret, and I had the perfect spot, Grandma's mortar and pestle, with its hidden compartment under a false bottom. They'd never taken it from me, and no one knew its secret. That's where I stashed my special medicine, as Miss Evelyn called it. Tiny, measured doses, ready to go. My plan grew slowly, like a weed creeping through cracks. It had to look natural, like bad luck or fate, nothing to point back to me. I started with Dr. Foster, the weakest link, not because he was kinder, but because he was a doctor. If he got sick and died naturally, who'd question it? A doctor should know better, right? I began slipping tiny grains of the poison into his morning coffee. Everyone at the Good Rest drank coffee, and I served it, so it was easy to hide. You couldn't taste it, smell it, or see it. Day after day, it built up in his system. For the first few months, nothing happened, and I wondered if I'd messed it up. Then, around month 3, Dr. Foster started griping about tiredness and aching joints. "Just getting old," the others teased. He diagnosed himself, rheumatism, maybe anemia, prescribing his own tonics and shots. Nothing helped. By month 6 he was a shadow, gaunt, yellow-skinned, eyes sunken, fevers coming and going, a cough that clung like damp rot. He stopped showing up for the full moon dinners, too weak to join in. The others mocked him. "Doc needs a lady to perk him up," they'd laugh. 8 months in, Dr. Foster was found dead in his boarding house bed after a 3-day stay in town. Stiff, mouth frozen in a silent scream, like he'd seen his end coming. The official word? Generalized infection, unknown cause, said a doctor from out of town. Sometimes the body just gives out. I served coffee at his wake, plain coffee for everyone else, watching from the sidelines, my face blank as stone. Ambrose was next. I upped the dose just a touch, knowing his whiskey-soaked liver would help the poison along. At first he just seemed hungover, nausea, headaches, nothing new for a drunk. Then his skin turned sallow, his eyes bloodshot. He stopped eating, his body bloating in some spots, shrinking in others. "Ease up on the bottle, buddy," Arthur would say, clueless that whiskey wasn't the real killer. A year and 2 months in, Ambrose collapsed at a cattle auction, foaming at the mouth. They rushed him to a hospital, but he was gone. Liver failure from years of drinking, they said at his funeral. No one blinked twice. Colonel Justin was trickier, lean, tough as old leather, and suspicious as a hawk. He didn't drink like Ambrose or mess with pills like Foster. I kept the dose small, careful not to change the coffee's taste. He'd notice in a heartbeat. It took time, but a stubborn cough crept in, then breathing trouble like his lungs were filling with mud. He got meaner, if that was possible, lashing out during those full moon nights when his body wouldn't cooperate. His slaps and punches came harder, but he'd gasp and wheeze, making it worse for himself. 1 year and 9 months in, he had a fit at dinner, turning purple, convulsing and collapsing. No one could save him. Pulmonary emphysema, the doctor called it, common for men his age. They looked for family to bury him, but found only scared workers who didn't even show up to his grave. Owen, the bank manager, was next to last. That polished, good guy facade started to crack. Chest pains he hid, dizzy spells he brushed off as low blood pressure. I saw him sneaking pills, visiting doctors out of town. He came to the boarding house less, skipping the main event at the full moon dinners, claiming he was tired. The others razzed him, calling him washed up. They didn't know he was dying on his feet. 2 years and 4 months in, he keeled over at the bank, mid-meeting, papers flying as he hit the desk, eyes wide with panic. They worked on him for an hour, no good. At his funeral, his prim wife dabbed her eyes, his grown kids eyeing their inheritance. No one mentioned his nights at the Good Rest. Arthur was the last, and I had to be patient. He was sharp enough to connect the dots if he got suspicious, noticing his friends dropping one by one. I kept the dose tiny, steady, letting it work like a slow leak. 3 years in, he was a husk of himself. Fat gone, skin sagging, plagued by headaches, stomach issues, weak legs, blurry eyes. He saw doctors, swallowed pills, prayed to every saint. Nothing helped. Even sick he wouldn't stop. He'd still call us to his room, using us like always, just slower, weaker. But now, when he did, I didn't cry. I'd meet his eyes with a faint smile, knowing his days were numbered. One morning I brought his coffee, same as always. 2 knocks on his door like usual. No answer. I knocked again, louder. Silence. Pushing the door open, I saw Arthur in bed. Eyes locked on the ceiling, face twisted in pain. He was gone, stiff for hours. Standing there, staring at the husk of the man who tormented me, I felt no rage, no fear, just peace, like a storm finally breaking into clear skies. "He's dead!" I called out, playing the panicked maid to perfection. On the nightstand sat his coffee cup, laced with a slightly heavier dose to seal the deal, untouched in the chaos. The doctor who came was baffled. "Never seen anything like it," he muttered, poking at Arthur's body. Heart, kidneys, liver, lungs, all shut down at once. He glanced around, suspicious. Any strange food? Medicine? I lowered my eyes, the picture of a humble servant. Just his usual coffee, doctor, same as every day. Now, I've got a question for you. Was I wrong? I poisoned 5 men, watched them waste away serving their coffee with a smile. Murderer or avenger? What do you call me? If you'd been in my shoes, knowing they'd keep breaking girls like me, what would you have done? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious. Arthur's death flipped everything. He had no family to claim the good rest, just a nephew from Atlanta who swooped in, sold the place, and pocketed the cash. He didn't care about us, sneering at Uncle's projects. The new owner, a local merchant, turned the boarding house into a warehouse. We were cut loose with a single month's pay, the first real money most of us had seen in years. At 17, I was free but lost. I could go anywhere, do anything, but where? All I knew was cooking and cleaning, and I carried a lifetime of scars inside. Miss Evelyn saved me. My place ain't a mansion, she said, but there's room for you. Her little house on Westbrook's edge was simple but warm, with a sprawling garden bursting with herbs and vegetables. After the boarding house, it felt like Eden. Living with her, I didn't just learn to survive, I learned to live. She taught me to make healing teas, soothing ointments and fever remedies, passing down recipes her family had guarded for generations. More than that, she showed me how to cook with soul. Dishes that weren't just food, but stories, flavoured with herbs and heart. She also got me my first real job. The owner of Country Kitchen needs a helper, she said. I told him about you. Mr. Hugh, a kind widower who'd built the diner after years on the railroad, gave me a shot despite my age and lack of resume. I started small, washing dishes, chopping vegetables, but he soon noticed my knack for flavours. "Where'd you learn to cook like this, girl?" he'd ask, amazed at how I could make a simple stew sing. "Family secrets," I'd say, thinking of Mom, Grandma's mortar and pestle, and Miss Evelyn, my chosen mother. I climbed from dishwasher to cook, then head chef. Customers started asking for Geraldine's beans or Geraldine's roast. My name became a promise of something special. But I never forgot my family in Brookhaven. When I'd saved enough, I went back, taking that same road as a free woman, not a tricked girl. The town hadn't changed much. Same sleepy square, same little church. At Mr. Anderson's store, now run by his son, I asked about my family. "Your mum, Irene, passed a while back," he said. "The kids scattered after." My heart sank. Mum died thinking I was okay, maybe even happy, as Arthur had promised. In a way, I was glad she never knew the truth. My older brothers had moved to Jackson, my sisters married and left Mississippi. The youngest, no one knew. I thought about tracking them down, but what could I say? How could I explain the years, the pain, what I'd done? Some truths are too heavy. I let them go, returning to Westbrook lighter, free to build my own life. That's when I started taking in women like me. First was Julia, bruised and running from a husband who beat her. I gave her food, a cot in the diner's back room, and a cleaning job at a nearby shop. Then came Maggie, 15, sold by her stepfather to a brothel disguised as a boarding house. She escaped before the worst, and I taught her to cook, gave her a safe place. One by one, women found me, like we shared a secret signal only the broken could hear. "Find Geraldine at Country Kitchen. She'll help," they'd whisper. I gave them what I could: meals, a bed, work, a listening ear, advice carved from my own scars. I knew every coffee I'd served those men, every grain of poison was worth it, not just for me, but for the girls they'd never hurt again. How many would have ended up at the good rest if Arthur hadn't sipped his last cup? I've never lost sleep over what I did, kept it secret until now, until it was safe, until they were all gone. That 14-year-old girl, lied to and broken, became a woman who turned pain into purpose. My mortar and pestle, once a hiding place for poison, now holds only healing herbs and spices that bring life, not death, a quiet transformation like mine. I worked at Country Kitchen for 7 years, saving every dime in a jam jar buried in Miss Evelyn's yard. When Mr. Hugh, old and frail, decided to sell, I was crushed. I didn't have enough. But Miss Evelyn opened a trapdoor in her floor, pulling out a box of old jewellery and coins. "My nest egg," she said, "you need it more." With her loan, which I repaid to the penny, I bought the diner. It was small, 10 tables, a modest kitchen, but it was mine. I kept the name Country Kitchen for a bit, out of respect for Mr. Hugh. After he passed, I renamed it Flavours of the Earth. At first I did it all, cooking, cleaning, bookkeeping. Then Rita came, battered, with 2 kids and no money. I gave her a job and the back room for her family. More followed. Josephine assaulted by her boss, Maria fleeing an abusive partner, Louise tricked into prostitution, Connie, 16 and pregnant, abandoned. They came, drawn by that invisible thread of shared pain. I hired only women, especially those who'd been through hell, teaching them to cook, serve, manage, and most importantly, to believe in themselves again. Flavours of the Earth grew famous not just for my gumbo or cornbread, but for its heart. Broken women found a home there, a place to heal without judgment. We expanded, knocking down walls, upgrading the kitchen, training more women. I started catering events, birthdays, weddings, first with a helper or 2, then with full teams of my heart daughters. Money came and I invested in better equipment, quality ingredients, a pickup truck for deliveries. I built my house, simple but mine, with a garden full of herbs. At 32, with the restaurant's 5th anniversary, I wanted more than a diner. I founded the Flavours and Knowledge Foundation, offering real culinary training, not just jobs. We started with 10 students in the restaurant's kitchen, then built a school on Westbrook's Edge, classrooms, an industrial kitchen, dorms, even a daycare so no woman had to choose between learning and her kids. The foundation grew with sponsors, city support and donations. We added business and marketing classes, empowering women to start their own ventures. Former students opened restaurants, bakeries, catering businesses across Mississippi, forming a network under the Flavours of the Earth brand. Owners shared a small cut to fund the foundation, and soon we had 6 locations, each carrying the same mission: good food, second chances. It's no empire, but for a girl who started with nothing, it's a dream come true. People sometimes ask if I regret it, if I should have gone to the police, let the law handle Arthur and his crew. I just smile. What law would have listened to a poor girl like me in the 1950s? Their word, rich, respected men, against mine. I'd have been called a liar, or worse, ended up dead on a roadside, another forgotten case. Those men ruined countless lives before mine and would have kept going. Dr. Foster preyed on patients, Ambrose beat women to death, Colonel Justin treated workers' daughters like property, Owen blackmailed women with his power, Arthur spun the whole web. The world's better without them. Each poisoned coffee was justice no court would have given. No one suspected me because I was invisible, a quiet cook, not a threat. Their own prejudice blinded them, let me slip under their noses. Would I do it again? In a heartbeat, maybe smarter, but the same. Sometimes you've got to be your own hero, your own justice. To the women reading this, here's what I've learned the hard way: trust your gut. That little voice warning you about a person or place. It's rarely wrong. Don't ignore it for politeness or fear. Watch for red flags. A man who controls you, belittles you, starts small before escalating. Get out early. Fight for your own money, your own skills. Build a network of women who'll have your back. They can take your home, your freedom, but never let them take your spirit. That's what keeps you going. I'm 87 now, my hands shaky when I chop onions, my legs aching after a day in the kitchen. But my heart, still strong, scars and all. I don't run the restaurants anymore. My heart daughters, women I trained, do that now. The foundation's led by former students, brilliant women carrying the torch. I'm just Granny D, tending my garden, grinding herbs in Grandma's mortar and pestle, now worn smooth. Sometimes I think of what that secret compartment once held, the poison that set me free. No regrets, not one. I'm Geraldine Mayquin, but you can call me Granny D. This is my story. Pain, yes, but mostly strength, turning poison into nourishment for others. Want more tales of women who faced the worst and rose up? Subscribe to the Grandparents' Tales